All right, I'm back. Or you're watching part two on YouTube. Video of this because I knocked over my laptop and shit stopped, and I don't know how to make two pieces of video into one. Um, so I was saying, yeah. So I went out to this shopping mall, the Fairlane shopping mall in Dearborn, Michigan, to pick up a rental car, which turned out to be cool, I guess, because I was staying far away from the venue, so I was not gonna have to Uber home that night. And it was weird because the Uber to get to the shopping mall cost like $22, but for like 15 miles, and the night before was fucking 3 miles for fucking $27. Goddamn Uber pricing. I think when you're in a big city like that too, like especially if you're not drinking, like there's no need to Uber around. I could just take a fucking bus. I could have stood on the street and waited for a bus in I'm sure it would have come much quicker than all that time I spent walking 2 miles um, in the middle of the night through uh, an unfamiliar and semi-dangerous city. So anyway, so I went out and got this car, and it was smooth. They gave me some Kia Sportage. Definitely not the nicest vehicle I've ever drove, but not terrible either. Like if I had to own one, I don't think I'd be angry. Um, Seemed to do just fine getting around, comfortable enough, handled okay. I didn't try to do any drifting in it, but then I ended up. So I'm driving back into downtown Detroit, and I was like, I could take the interstate, but I fucking hate interstates. If you guys know anything about me, you probably understood by now or heard me say enough times that like interstates are the most boring way to ever drive, and if you can avoid them, unless you really need to get somewhere as fast as possible, there's no good reason to be on an interstate because you're never going to stumble upon anything cool on an interstate. You're not going to see anything really pretty. Um, so I took Ford Road back, um, pretty much all the way back into the city, into Detroit from Dearborn. And along the way, I was like, oh, maybe I'll stop at a Tim Hortons, right? Because like Tim Hortons kind of cool donut shop chain that they don't have many of outside of the like near the border towns of Canada. Obviously, they got a lot of them in Buffalo and upstate New York along the Canadian border. But I was like, I like Tim Hortons. Maybe I'll get it at Tim Hortons, even though, like, why should I fucking like Tim Hortons? Like, Tim Horton has nothing to do with Tim Hortons. He hasn't had anything to do with it for a long time. It was only a couple of years after it got founded that he died in a car accident. And then his ex partner and his wife ended up turning it into the huge conglomerate that it is now, or setting it on that path, anyways. We read a whole story about the history of Tim Hortons, so it's pretty cool. Tim Horton was a hockey player, by the way, who died in, he was drunk and on pain medication and was trying to drive home to, I think it was Hamilton, Ontario. He was trying to drive after a game that happened in Toronto, and because he wanted to be with his family, but he ended up crashing and dying. And anyway, there's a very interesting. There was like a 10-part series, like what Ken Burns did for baseball, the CBC did for hockey, the Canadian Broadcast Corporation. And there's a great little interview snippet in there with Tim Horton, and the interviewer asks him, what are your plans for, you only got a few years of playing left or whatever, like you're getting up there in age, like what are your plans for retirement? You think you're going to be okay to retire from hockey, and do you have any plans? And he looks at the camera and he's like, well, I started a little donut shop and that seems to be going well, so I guess I'll probably run that, eh? And it's funny now that Tim Hortons is like, they're the biggest coffee seller in Canada. Over 70% of all the coffee bought in Canada is bought through Tim Hortons. So it's kind of like if Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks were combined in America. It's such a big place. And they also serve like real food too. Like you get sandwiches and burgers and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a mixture of McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts. Definitely more Dunkin' Donuts than Starbucks because their coffee's pretty halfway decent as opposed to Starbucks, which is bullshit. And I gotta say, I'm very proud of Starbucks workers for forming unions all over the place right now, and they got Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, shook. Apparently, he gave an interview the other day and said a lot of stupid things, which I can't remember right now. But basically, like they're just fucking literally whining and complaining that the unions are going to make it harder for him to do business. And it's like, well, exactly, man. If you treated your employees kind and fairly, they wouldn't have needed to unionize. And you just posted record profits for Starbucks. But didn't want to give people raises. So, like, fuck you, man. God bless the unions. I'm very happy for them. I'm very happy for the people who form the unions at Amazon, too. And I hope more people unionize. Because, hey, man, without labor, the wheels of capitalism grind to a halt. And I know it's going to cause more inflation for a while, and that's a tricky situation, right? But um, you don't have to buy everything, but you got to get paid more. And the government's not going to do anything by upping minimum wage. So workers have to unite and demand better treatment from their corporate overlords. So God bless them for that. Okay? I'm going to try to stay out of politics this week and for in general in the future on this podcast. But I'm never going to be sad if unions are forcing their bosses to give them better fucking working conditions and wages. So yeah, good for you guys. So I was going to stop at a Tim Hortons, but then I was even like, I guess Tim Hortons, I have this kind of attachment to it because I think it's kitschy and hockey owner guy, but he hasn't owned it in forever. It's company that owns Wendy's or whatever owns Tim Hortons now. And it's just what the fuck? Why do I want to support them? And I'm driving down the street and I see this huge sign that says Donutville, USA. And it's a really tall sign. So I almost fucking... I really tested the limits of the Kia's drifting by jerking the steering wheel into the parking lot, and I was looked like it was a very old school kitschy donut shop. So I went in there and I was like, give me coffee, and I actually got 2 donuts. I got a blueberry jelly filled donut and a something that looked kind of like a red velvet. I forget what it was called, but I got 2 donuts and sat at the counter and just enjoyed myself. And it was very like late 50s, early 60s. Sort of space age bachelor pad decor in there. It was pretty cool. And I dug it. And I was listen, there are a bunch of old guys in there. One guy with a Vietnam vet hat on. And I sat down next to him, and whereas a Korea veteran and even older. And he was just like, hey, how's it going? I was like, hey, not bad, man. You know what I mean? Every day I'm alive is a good day. And he was like, I hear you, bro. And then he went to get off his chair, and he was he was hurting. You could tell he was moving very slowly, and he turned to me and he's like, don't ever get old. Getting old sucks. And I was like, yeah, but it sure beats being dead, right? And he was like, once again, you got a point. And he was like, sure beats being dead, but it also sucks. Just a lot of things stop working. And I was like, well, can't all be perfect for every day of our lives, right, buddy? And, gave me a little wink, and that was about it. And didn't really chat to anyone else, but just kind of watched everybody. It was definitely Cretanville in there, in a good way. Didn't see anyone who looked like they should be getting their coffee at Starbucks. But you know what? Why? I still don't understand why people get their coffee at Starbucks. And this isn't even really a political thing, but everyone makes fun of McDonald's. Right, because it's such a chain and just a corporate culture thing. But people really tend to they treat Starbucks as a cool part of their identity, and people love to, well, what's your Starbucks order? I like a macchiato or whatever. And it's what are you retarded? It's just a fucking huge corporate chain. They don't even make good coffee. So I'm hoping that more people will find local coffee shops, and spend their money there. Vote with their wallet. Do you just want more Starbucks showing up? I don't understand that. But a lot of people do. A lot of people just want everything to be the same wherever they go. And that's why they like interstates, and they want the same businesses at the same looking rest stops that have the bathrooms in the same place, because people are afraid of change. And those people and me, we are not the same. And I'm guessing that most of you listening to this, if you're listening to the ramblings of this fucking lunatic, me, then I can't imagine that you like things being the same all the time. And, just driving back to the city on Ford Road, the Uber guy took me on the interstate. I was like, I don't give a fuck. Just get me to this mall as soon as possible. Get me out of your fucking Uber car, But on the way back, I was like, let's see what I see. Then I sent a picture to my buddy, Chris Tate. Chris Tate plays keyboards in the venerable Electric Six and is a long-time mainstay of the Detroit rock and roll scene. And unfortunately, Chris Tate was on the road with the Electric Six. So I wasn't able to hang out with him when I was there. But I sent him a picture. I sent him a picture of the previous night from Hamtramck Disneyland. He's like, I love that you're at Hamtramck Disneyland, And then... So the next day I sent him a picture of me at Donutville, and he's like, I love that you're fucking hitting up all the must-see weirdo spots in Detroit. And I was like, I didn't even know this was a must-see weirdo spot. I just happened to be fucking driving by and saw the sign, and I pulled in, and he was like, well, you got a good weirdo spot radar, you know? And I was like, yeah, I do. So then I finished with my little donuts, and then I got a text from my buddy Ross Berkson, who we used to work together at Wetlands back in the day, and he's been working for Jack White on and off for years, doing merchandising for him, kind of heading up the merch operation. And he was out on the road with Jack, so I had asked him, you know, hey, do you want to get together? And so he had said maybe Saturday breakfast, and then while I was eating my donuts, I got a text and he was like, hey, how's 10:30 work for breakfast? And I looked at my watch and it was like 9:45, and I was like, that's perfect. So I just stayed on Ford. I got back in the car and got on Ford Road and drove down Ford Road right into downtown Detroit, and then ended up parking the car. And then I went around for a little wander, and I saw this hotel that I forget what it was now. It was some sort of like Hilton something or other, but it looked just old and funky and cool. So I walked into the lobby and sat on a couch, and then I texted him. I was like, you wouldn't happen to be in this hotel, would you? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, cool, I'm in the lobby, I'll see you in a minute. Then we went to try to get some hipster breakfast at the place called the Dime Store, I think it was called, and they were like, there was an hour and a half wait. And I said to the lady, where would you eat breakfast in this neighborhood right now? And she's like, oh, definitely at this pub. She said it with a very Michigan accent, and she was like, go to this pub. She told us where it was, and I was like, that cool with you? He's like, yeah, I don't have a lot of time because I have to get to the venue and set stuff up. So I was like, cool. So we walked over to that pub, and I was like, I don't know, I want to eat breakfast at a pub, right? But then there was kind of a greasy spoon right next door to the pub. So we went in there, and we had a fucking lovely breakfast, and it was great. And then after that, I walked Ross back to the hotel and saw him, let him be on his way to work, and fucking, you know, time to make the donuts, make the merchandise, all that kind of stuff. And then I went for a big walk around Detroit. I had parked in a place and paid for 4 hours, so I was like, I'm gonna go to this place called Eastern Market, which is like a huge sort of farmers market slash goodies market that happens in Detroit, Michigan every Saturday that a bunch of people have told me about, I heard about. So I was like, I'm gonna go check this out. So I went and checked that out, but a lot of it was indoors, and I was like, I don't really need anything. I don't really not gonna buy any produce, right? You know, to take back to my hostel. So I just kind of did a lap of the whole entire thing, and then I was like, I'm gonna go walk back. There was a way to walk back that was gonna bring me right by Comerica Park, which is where the Tigers play, and the Tigers had a game that day. And I gotta say, the day before it turned out to be opening day for baseball, and opening day at Comerica Park. I'm going to call it Tiger Stadium, even though the old park was called Tiger Stadium. But why should I don't like having to refer to places that are named after a bank or whatever Comerica is. I imagine it's a bank. Or insurance company or whatever the fuck it is. But like, just because they paid to name the park, that doesn't mean I have to call it that. So I'm going to call it Tiger Stadium. So I walked back by Tiger Stadium, and I was getting there right before the game was going to start. So there was all vibe in the air, and fathers and sons and families walking to the game, and little boys wearing like their Tigers jerseys and wearing a glove on their hand. And I was like, this just, isn't that America, right? Even though baseball seems to be dying a sort of fast death, in that the ratings are way down. Attendance is way down, and the only reason, you know, if you're curious as to why baseball players get paid so much money, even though attendance is going down, it's that a lot of these teams, they sort of got their own cable network, right? Like there's all these regional sports networks, and a lot of times the teams own these, right? Like the Mets own whatever Sports Channel New York, whatever they air on, and maybe they air on MSG Network. If they don't own it, like the Yankees have the Yes Network, Yankees Entertainment and Sports Network. So a lot of these teams have their own networks, and then cable companies pay. If you didn't know how cable worked, if you were curious, cable companies pay for every channel. So why do you pay $80 a month for cable? It's because for every subscriber, they have different fees. A lot of them give it away to the cable company for free so they can sell advertising and just get in front of a lot of eyeballs, like the really shitty networks. But all the good ones, the cable companies have to pay a fee to. So ESPN is famous for having the highest fee because everyone who has cable, pretty much they say that everyone is going to want ESPN. So ESPN gets a high fee, you know, per subscriber. Fox News gets a high one, CNN gets one. So there's channels you just have to have, right? You got to have TBS, you have to have TNT, you have to have USA, whatever. So they're going to get more money And then it's like anything in business with leverage. But these sports networks have these long-standing contracts and with the cable companies. But as cable's slowing down and the companies are finding other ways to people are finding other ways to get their television, they're these networks are going to start collecting a lot smaller rights fees as their sort of as their contracts expire, and the cable companies are going to be like, we're not going to pay this much for the Yankees channel anymore, and Yankees are probably going to be marketing, standalone packages to watch all of their games and stuff like that, direct to consumers. But that's why it seems, if you look and see how much their money they're paying these baseball players, it might seem like baseball's doing great. But nobody goes to these games anymore. Nobody gives a fuck. Kids certainly don't give a fuck. The game is too slow. The action is too slow, and the games are too long, and there's too many of them, and people just, it's a new world, right? People don't even want that many games anymore. So, part of the reason the NFL is so huge and successful and so many people watch it every week is because there's only 16 games in a season, plus the playoffs. Is it 17 games now? Did they add one? But whatever, that's still, and it's only on Sundays, Obviously, there's a Thursday night game and a Monday night game, and sometimes there's a Saturday game, but, for the most part, each team only plays one game a week. There might not only be one day a week, but baseball's just kind of over. So anyway, I walked in there and I walked by the park and I walked up to the ticket office and I was just like, "Hey man, what's the cheapest seat you have available?" And the guy just kind of rolled his eyes as if to say, "You're one of those people." He's like, $10. And I was like, "Cool, give me a $10 ticket." And he gave me a $10 ticket and I slid him a $10 bill. He slid me a $10 ticket. There were no service fees, which was nice. And I was in section 344, and I walked in the front gate, and I was like, "Where's this at?" And the guy was like, "Oh, you're going to walk around that way to the left, and then you're going to see escalators. You're going to take 3 escalators to get up to 300 level." I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not. Watch this." So I just fucking walked in, and I saw the dugout on the first base side, which turned out to be it was the Chicago White Sox dugout who they were playing against, and I just walked right up and down the stairs, and I walked right into the section before where the dugout was, and there was a guy who was like, "Can I see your ticket?" And I said, "Oh no, sir, I'm just sitting down here." And he's like, "Can I see your ticket?" And I said, "Sir, I am the King of England. It is your honor to have me here, and I'm going to sit wherever I'd like." And he just looked at me like, "What the fuck did you just say to me?" And I kept walking, and I sat 10th row behind the dugout. And you might think that I'm making that up. I'm not making that up. I am not making that up at all. So, just in case you were wondering. Because it would be easy to think that I made that up. Because a lot of outrageous shit goes on in my brain. But that didn't come out of that's not from my imagination. I'm just going to tell you that right now. And I sat there and I watched 2 innings of baseball. And it was in the mid 40s and it was a little chilly. So about 2 innings was all I needed. And I had also paid to park my car for only 4 hours. So I was like, after the second inning, I was like, I got about 15 minutes to get back to my car. And I got back to my car just in time. And got back to the car, and then what did I do? Jesus. Then I drove. Oh, then I went to Third Man Records, Jack White's record store and pressing facility. And I got there, and first I got myself a little egg sandwich because I was a little hungry by that time after breakfast. I went to the, what is it called? What, the Atlas? There's one of those classic New York coffee shops that I knew. Avalon Coffee. So I went to Avalon Coffee, which is around the corner from Third Man Records on the Cass corridor there, and got myself a little egg and cheese sandwich and a coffee and a chocolate chip cookie, and then I walked over to Third Man Records, and it was mobbed. And I think probably a combination of it being a Saturday, and there were probably a bunch of people, a fair amount of people probably came to town for the weekend to see the Jack White shows. And of course, they were all going to go to his record store on Saturday afternoon. So I was very quick in and out. I was like, I'm going to come back on Monday. I bet there's going to be no one here on Monday. And I just did a quick lap of the place, and it was so cool. Such awesome design. Took a bunch of pictures. I'll put those on the Tuesdays with Jakey. Put those on the Tuesdays with Jakey Instagram page. And wow, this has gone a long podcast. But anyway, So yeah, I went there, and then finally I was like, all right, I'm gonna go back to my room at the Hamtramck Hostel. So I went back to my room and took a little nap, and then I got up and I drove my car back down into town and went to the Budapest Grill, which is a little Detroit-based shawarma chain. And Chris Tate said it was the best shawarma he'd ever had. And I don't know if I'm going to go that far to say it was the best shawarma I ever had, but it was decent. And I found a free parking spot in some shady alley for my car because there was a Detroit Red Wings game going on too. So all the places anywhere near the Red Wings Stadium, Little Caesars Arena, which is also near the Masonic Temple, everyone was charging $30 to park, and I was like, I'm not gonna do that. So I found a sketchy place to park and hope my car didn't get broken into. And guess what? It didn't. It was fine. And I kind of found it because Adam Bauer from SpeakeasyMeats.com, he had parked near there in an even I would say an even sketchier spot. Kind of like up on a little mound of a hill that he pulled his pickup truck onto. And it was right next to a parking lot where they were charging $30, but it was like just kind of an abandoned lot. There's a lot of empty abandoned lots in Detroit, as I said, because all the buildings that had burned down and just fell into disrepair and got knocked down. So I was kind of following Adam's lead by parking down this fucking shady alley, sort of abandoned lot type of place. But then I went there, walked to get my shawarma, and then I got to the venue pretty early because I was like, I don't really have anything else to do, and I brought a book with me, The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. Camus? I don't know how you say his last name. Probably Camus, because he's French, I believe. But Camus. I brought a book, and I was like, I would be that guy reading the fucking philosophy book between sets at a concert, right? But I was like, well, I'm not gonna have my phone, and like, there's gonna be half-hour changeovers, so what do I have to do? Just sit there and stare? I was like, well, yeah, of course, kind of like meditate, but so I went and got my seat, and the first night I had bought seats because I was afraid when I was buying these tickets that I wouldn't want to sit just on I wouldn't want to stand in a crowd, a GA crowd, after like having spent the whole winter out by myself. I didn't want to get jostled around or whatever. So I bought seats for these shows, not GA floor spot tickets. And first night though, Adam and his buddy John, they got tickets. Adam used his music business connections to hook up 2 free tickets for himself, and they got their seats on the floor. And then he ended up knowing someone at the box office, and then they gave him a floor wristband for me, and then I gave them my seat, and they were actually stoked because they said certain customers who were on the guest list, all the guest list tickets were for the floor, and they were like, a couple of the people have already shown up for the guest list were like, oh, I'd rather a seat than be on the floor. So she was like, just give me your actual ticket. So I did, and we got down on the floor. And then for the second night, I was like, maybe I'll try that again, but like, let me see how my seat is. And it was great. It was just like 4 rows behind the soundboard, dead center. It was fucking great. And I watched the first opening band, who was Sugar Tradition, who were really good, young Detroit garage rock kids, probably like in their early 20s. And I was happy to have seen them. And then the 4 seats next to me were completely empty. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. These people haven't gotten here yet. And then who do I see come walking up towards me but Lalo, Jack's longtime tour manager, who I met once because when I was running the Brooklyn Bowl in London, we did a Jack White after party. He played at the O2 Arena, and then we did the after party. Brooklyn Bowl was part of the O2 Arena complex. So I'd met Lalo that night, and we had emailed a bunch of times and talked on the phone leading into it because they wanted to do the after party. And so I knew exactly who he was. He did not recognize me when he came walking up to me, and I certainly wasn't gonna like say anything in the middle of his workday, like, hey man, we met once in 2016, 15 actually. It was 15. Hey, we met in 2015. But he came up, and I was like, he had 4 like children with him, and he came walking right up to me, and I was like, this is funny. And then he goes, hey, what row is this? And I was like, it's row I. And he was like, section 201. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, what seats are these? And I was like, that's 211, 209, 207, 205. He's like, okay. And he turned to the kids, and he's like, that's where you guys are sitting. He was like, thanks, buddy. And I was like, hey, no problem. And then he put the 4 kids into my row, and then he just took off. And I was like, these must be Jack's kids, right? And it was 2 boys who were like sat next to each other, and then a boy and a girl, probably 15 years old or so, and they were holding hands. And I knew Jack had a daughter and a son, so I was like, one of those two boys that are sitting next to each other must be his son, and then it was easy to figure out which one that was. And then I was like, this must be his daughter holding hands with this other boy. And so when they sat down, like I had to get up to move out of I was in the end seat, and they sat down, and then the two next to me, the boy and the girl, were like, hey, thanks, man. And I was like, oh, no problem. And they were like, oh, good show so far. You having fun? And I was like, yeah, actually. Like, I was like, do you know the name of that last band? Because I had forgotten what their name was, and they didn't say it. And then the boy was like, oh yeah, they're called Sugar Tradition. I was like, oh, that's right. And they're like, yeah, they got produced by one of the guys in the Soledad Brothers, Johnny Walker. And I was like, oh my god, cool. I was like, this guy knows everything about music. That's cool. I was like, I'm Jake, by the way. And he was like, hey, I'm Colton. And then the girl was like, oh, I'm Scarlett. And I was like, oh, cool. Good to meet you guys. And I wasn't going to say anything corny. That's basically where the conversation ended. And then a little later, I pulled out a pack of juicy fruit that I had bought at a deli. And I was like, would you guys like some gum? And they were like, sure, we would love some gum. So I gave them some chewing gum. And that was really the extent of our conversation, because I wasn't going to be like, oh, you guys big Jack White fans? Because I was like, pretty sure it's just fucking kids right here. You know what I mean? So just didn't really say anything. And then Olivia came on, and we all watched Olivia's set. And then there was another half hour to kill, and I went out for a walk, bought a can of ginger ale, looked at the merchandise. Oh, and I should mention, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see this right now, but I'm wearing my Jack White t-shirt that I bought from a bootlegger outside on the first night. $10. They wanted 20, but I talked them down to 10 pretty quickly, because you could do that after a show. When you see the bootleggers before the show, they're always want $20. After the show, they're gonna want 20, but they'll usually settle for 10. But sometimes you have to wait around for like 10 minutes too, because if you're one of the first people at the door after the show ends, they're trying to get that $20. But after they realize most of the crowd streamed out, you can get these shirts for $10. And as much as I love Jack White, I didn't love the designs he had for his shirts for this tour. And so I didn't want to buy a $35 t-shirt, which is still a very reasonable price. But I just was like, I don't love that design. But this design I loved, and it's got all the tour dates on the back. I didn't love it, but it's like, the bootleggers always tend to have like more standard designs that has the name of the artist and a picture, whereas sometimes the artists try to get too arty with their tour merch, and that's when I don't love it. So anyway, I had bought this shirt the night before. When I went out, looked at the merch again, and I ended up buying a lighter and a keychain from the merch booth. And then the show happened, and there was almost no mention. Jack didn't mention anything about the wedding from the night before. Olivia Jean, halfway through her set, just said, like, after she played the first song, she's like, hey, my name's Olivia Jean. Thank you guys for coming out and listening to my songs. Anyone else have a good night last night? And the crowd cheered. And it was like, that was the only mention of where she goes, anyone else do anything interesting last night? Or was it just me? And the whole crowd cheered. And that was like all the mention. And then Jack came out for his fucking show, and it was fucking killer. And everybody in my section stood up the entire time, which was great, because I wanted to stand up, and I danced, and I had danced the night before too, and like, music just fucking moved me. So then after the show, I'm not going to get too much into the show, because whatever, you already know, like, it was a great show, I loved it. So then after the show, I went and got my car, and it was still there, and actually looked around for a bootlegger again, and I think they might have gotten the Smackdown Crackdown, because a friend wanted me to get a shirt for his boss, the bagel guy, and looked for the bootleggers, but didn't see him. But they also might have just been on the other side of the venue or whatever. I didn't actually look that hard, because I wanted to get to my car, and I wanted to get to the Raven Lounge, which I had read about on atlasobscura.com. And the Raven Lounge is like one of the oldest blues bar in Detroit. And so I looked it up on my little Google map, and I pointed the car there. And when I got there, boy, I got to tell you, I don't mind telling you that it was in a bad neighborhood. And it was to the point where I was like, am I going to leave the car here, this rental car here? And I was like, fuck it, it's insured, But I was like, I just didn't want to deal with it broken into or anything. And it was definitely a bad neighborhood. I don't know how else to say it, but like, sometimes you're in a bad neighborhood, you just fucking know. I was like, this is not a good neighborhood. And I pulled up, and there were bars on the windows, and it just had a neon sign that said Raven Lounge and Grill, or whatever it said. And I had that moment though where I was like, looks like a really rough neighborhood, and I'm going to an old blues bar in this rough neighborhood. It certainly hasn't been hipstered. Are there going to be any white people there? I don't know. Um, and are they going to take kindly to me coming in? And I'm like, well, it's in Atlas Obscura. They probably, I'm not. It's not like nobody's ever come here before. But I definitely had that moment where I was like, what am I doing? Like, and without anyone there with me, I was like, if shit goes sideways, it always feels better to have somebody with you. But I was like, you know what? What are you scared of? What are you scared of, Jake? And I just walked up and I opened the door, and the club was black. It was very black. There were no other white people there, and and oddly enough, they were the only place that asked me if I had a Vax card all week in Detroit. And the woman was like, I was like, oh, is there a cover? And she was like, yeah, it's $10, honey. And I was like, okay. And she's like, let me see your Vax card. And I was like, excuse me? What? I literally didn't hear her. It didn't process what I heard. And she was like, I need to see your Vax card. You've been vaccinated? And I was like, oh, hell yeah, I've been vaccinated. I was like, boosted too. And she was like, okay, let me see the card. I was like, oh, right. I don't have it with me. I got a picture of it on my phone. I hope that's okay. And she was like, yeah. And I'm scrolling through my phone trying to find it. And she was not going to believe me. So I finally found it, and I went in. And then I sat down and I ordered some food. And I got some kind of fish. They had catfish and another kind of fish. And the woman said the other kind of fish was better. And I just said to the woman waitress with very long braids all the way down to like her butt. She was like, oh, and she had a sweatsuit on that said on down one leg in sequin letters, "Love Vegas," and I was like, all right. So I asked her what's the best thing to eat here, and she was like, oh, the fish, definitely the fish. And I was like, what kind? She's like, well, we got catfish and this other kind of fish, which I'd never even heard of. And I was like, well, I ain't never tried that other kind of fish, never even heard of it. She's like, well, then go with the catfish. Then go with what you know. And I was like, no. Is the other kind good? And she was like, yeah, it's the better kind. And I was like, cool, I'll have that kind. And I was like, what side do I want? She was like, mac and cheese. And I was like, in no universe is mac and cheese a good side for fish, really. Like cheese and fish, no, those don't go well together at all. But I was like, that in a split second in my head, I thought all of that. And then I thought, well, yeah, of course you're going to have the fucking mac and cheese because you asked her what to get, and that's what she told you. And she's like, what do you want to drink? And I was like, I'll have a Coca-Cola, please. And about 20 minutes later, she came over to me and she said, hey, I'm sorry, thank you for being patient. It's not going to be more than 20 minutes now. Your order will come out. And I thought to myself, I was like, it's already been 20 minutes. You're telling me it's going to be 20 more minutes? There's not that many people here. There are only maybe 30 people in the whole club. And I don't know how many of them showed up at midnight looking for dinner. But, so I couldn't imagine how long the line was for food. But, then another 20 minutes goes by, and then she comes over. She's like, hey, thank you for being patient. You're going to be next. And I was like, cool, let me get another Coca-Cola, please. And she was like, all right. And then by that time, I had actually moved from one table to another because someone got up. My table was already all the way in the back. And then I got up and I moved to another table that was closer when some people got out of that because I wanted to be closer to the band. And Blues Club? I don't know. More like a funk club. What songs were they playing? They played, shit. I don't even remember. Shit. They were playing more like older funk songs. Funk and like old soul songs, but I wouldn't really call what they were doing blues so much. But, man, why can't I remember? It doesn't really matter. Because it was all covers, I assume. But yeah, they played some Earth, Wind, and Fire. They played, They played some James Brown. Fuck. There's one song that they really fucking killed. Papa was a rolling stone. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. They played a really long version of that with some good guitar solos in it. But yeah, it was just good vibes. Good vibes. And finally, an hour after I ordered my dinner. So by this point, it was 1 a.m. And I was like, I didn't even want to eat at 1 a.m. I wanted to eat at midnight because I figured the food would be out in like 10 or 15 minutes. But I ate the whole meal, and it did turn out to be very good. They brought me the fish, French fries, came with a salad too. A salad and the side of mac and cheese and what turned out to be 3 glasses of Coca-Cola. The whole bill was $23.50. It was very reasonable. Yeah, salad with blue cheese dressing. Because I was like, what kind of dressing do you want? This is after I already decided to order the mac and cheese. I was like, well, let's keep the cheese theme going. You know what I mean? Give it to me blue cheese dressing. Fuck it. Cheese and fish, right? And then the last call came at 1:45. They made last call, and then the woman sitting at the table. There was a few tables between me and the stage, but the next table towards the stage was this woman who looked like to be in her late 30s, and her husband about the same age, maybe 40, 41 or whatever. And they were like, okay, you know, it's last call. We're gonna play one more song, and then the woman just started screaming, play Johnny Guitar Watson. You gotta play Johnny Guitar Watson. And he was like, okay, I'm not sure we're gonna play Johnny Guitar Watson, but this is gonna be the last song. And she's like, you can't call last call without playing Johnny Guitar Watson. We need to hear Johnny Guitar Watson before we got to go. And I was like, if you don't know Johnny Guitar Watson, he is not a very famous blues player who had his heyday in the 70s and into the 80s a little bit. He was a bit of a weirdo from Houston, Texas. Never really got any kind of mainstream recognition. And I definitely found it very odd and specific that she was cheering for Johnny Guitar Watson. But then she turned to me and she was looking around the crowd like, anyone else gonna want some Johnny Guitar Watson? And I was like, hell yeah, we want some Johnny Guitar Watson. Gangster of Love would be a great one to hear. And she's like, that's what I mean. That's what I'm talking about. He wants to hear Johnny Guitar Watson too. And then they played one more song and then finished, and it was just about 2 o'clock. And then I went to get up to leave, and the women sitting at the table behind me, who I had tried to smile at when I went to sit down, but they didn't smile at me. In fact, they did the opposite. They were the only people in the place that gave me the sort of energy that was like, this white motherfucker's here, right? Which, I don't blame them either, because I'm sure when they do get tourists coming there, a lot of them probably aren't acting right. Probably, most of them are probably filming the whole thing and all wide-eyed, like, I can't believe I'm in a place with black people, But, when I got up to leave, I said to the women, and, I had my mask on the whole time there, too, and I would literally just pull it up to put some food in my mouth and then pull it back down when I chewed. I was the only one in there wearing a mask, and I hope they didn't think anything weird of it, But I did get up, and I actually gave the guy a tip at the end, the singer of the band, because they had a tip jar out. And I gave him a tip, and he gave me a big bro hug and was like, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. And I was like, yeah. So, even with my mask on, though, I'd like to think people could see me smile. But these two women at the table behind me, and they were in their mid to late 50s, and they were like, are you leaving? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, you're supposed to buy a drink for the people at the table next to you. And I was like, oh, really? I didn't see that on the bottom of the menu. Maybe they should list that. I didn't know that was a requirement of being here. And they're like, well, it would be the right thing to do. And I was like, actually, the right thing to do would have been you guys buy me a drink. Why is one person, me, supposed to buy you guys 2 drinks? 2 of you could have pooled your money and bought me 1 drink. And I'm only drinking Coca-Cola, so it would have been cheaper. And they just stared at me. They didn't even stare at me in a mad, hard way. They were just staring at me like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? And I was like, anyway, you guys take care. Have a nice night. And they were like, okay. And I just left. And that's what I left them with. But it's like, you didn't fucking try to shame me for not buying you guys drinks? And you guys were drinking Long Island iced teas. Those were $10. I saw it on the menu. It's the only thing you could have been drinking based on what it looked like when they brought it out to you in a big fucking tall cup with a straw. So I was like, what am I going to buy $20 worth of Long Island iced teas for ladies next to me? My whole bill was only $23.50. I got fucking 3 Coca-Colas. I got this weird fish that wasn't catfish. I got french fries. I got a salad and mac and cheese. Yeah, they think I'm some kind of fucking sucker. You know what I mean? I was born at night, but not last night, baby. That's what I should have said to her to quote Kid Rock. She definitely wouldn't have known that was from a Kid Rock song. Maybe it's a line Johnny Guitar Watson used once too. But anyway, so then I went home, and then I went to sleep. And I was like, man, my soul is just full, right? Because those Jack White shows were fucking incredible. And then seeing some more music at night, well, it was fucking great. Even though it wasn't the greatest music and they weren't the greatest players, it was fine. And I enjoyed it. And just being in a nice vibe like that, that setting, the setting was really what fed my soul. Being in an old live music club with a bunch of older black people, I very much enjoyed that. And then I woke up the next morning and I went to church. And I was looking for churches to go to in Detroit, and I asked around. I reached out to some of my network of church-going folk, and nobody had a good suggestion for me. So I was Googling around good Baptist churches in Detroit, and then I found one called New Bethel Baptist Church, which is where Aretha Franklin's daddy used to be the preacher, and Aretha Franklin had sang a little bit, but they had moved they had moved the church in 1964 to the location it's at currently, and apparently Aretha was part of the choir and sang a lot when she was younger at the other location. But by '64, Aretha was kind of becoming a star, so it wasn't. I don't know. I didn't look this up, but I imagine Aretha's stuff was in that like early 60s, right? Like early to mid 60s. So I assume Aretha came out 64, 65. So I assume by the time her daddy moved the church, that wasn't where she was regularly singing as part of the choir when she was coming up. So probably isn't the place where Aretha did all of her singing, or most of her singing at that church, but it's where her daddy was the pastor forever. So I'm sure she came back there on a somewhat regular basis. Anyway, I got there, and it was also in a bad neighborhood, and I was actually looking for coffee on the way there, and I just figured I'd come across a coffee shop, but then I wasn't having any luck, and I started to get into a bad neighborhood where there are still a lot of abandoned or burned down houses. So I was like, fuck, where am I going to find coffee? So then I passed this place called what was it called? The Covenant or something? It was some religious name, and it looked like a church, but it said it had coffee. So I like pulled up, and it turned out it was an old church that had been repurposed into a coffee shop, and it was pretty fucking cool. And I walked in, and it was pretty fucking busy, and it was all white people, even though it was definitely a black neighborhood. So I was trying to fucking figure out what was going on there. But there was like, I don't know, fucking 15 or 20 people inside eating breakfast and stuff, and it was like a coffee house, plus they had a pretty good food menu. But I just got my coffee, and I was like, what's the best pastry you have here? And she was like, this lemon pound cake or whatever. I was like, cool, I'll take that. So I got a latte and that, and then I went to the church spot, and it was definitely sketch neighborhood, but I parked my car outside, and I was like, cool, I'm gonna go inside. Totally didn't realize it was Palm Sunday. So I walk inside, and it's Palm Sunday, and everybody was nice to me. I gotta say, I found like every time I've gone to a black church, which is lots of times when traveling, that's kind of, if I'm in a city with any sort of black heritage, which is most cities, then I will try to find a good black church to go to. Because it just, I don't know, there's something about these places, man. Like, usually the pastor is going to give a good sermon, and like, you know, these sermons don't have that much to do with God. They'll like take a Bible verse or a piece of the scripture or something and tell you about it, but then it's really just, it's always like self-help sessions, which is what I love so much. And then the music and the singing is usually fucking great. And I gotta say, this church, like, probably would have been better if Aretha was singing. It was pretty good, and the pastor was pretty good, but then I came to find out it wasn't the main pastor. It was one of the junior pastors who now has moved on to pastor at his own church, and the main guy only came out and gave something at the end, did a little sort of wrap up after the preacher, the guest preacher, did his whole thing. But it was still pretty good. I was certainly the only white person there, and at one point, actually, they were like asking if anyone needed to be born again and needed to be accepted into a church, and a woman actually came over to where I was and came down the aisle, a little woman who worked for the church, and she's like, are you looking for your own church? And I was like, no, I got one. And she was like, oh yeah, where's your church? And I just looked at her, I said, it's in Idaho, I'm just visiting for the weekend. And she was like, Idaho, well, all right, okay then, okay, you got your own church, that's cool. And then she left, and I was like, why are you picking me up? Why are you picking me up as the one heathen here? But 4 people chose to get born again and become members of that church, which I thought was cool. So they brought them down in the front, and they gave them a little blessing, and then they ushered them through a side door where they're probably going to fleece them and take all their money. And then at the very end of the service, there was also in my aisle, further down into the aisle, was a black woman in a lime green onesie, like jumpsuit. That was pretty good look she had going on. And she was there with her daughter, who was maybe like 10 years old. And when the service ended and I was getting up to leave, I like looked down at them and just kind of smiled as if to say, hey, that was a good service. It was nice sitting near you. And then the daughter looked really nervous, and the mother said, go ahead, go ahead. And the daughter, 10-year-old, walked down to where I was, probably like 7 or 8 feet down the pew. And she just came right up to me and went, I really like your hair. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. That's so sweet of you to tell me that. Wow, I really appreciate it. A lot of people think it looks kind of funny, but she's like, it don't look funny. I like it. It looks really nice. And I was like, oh, that's so cute. And I was like, thank you so much. I love your braids. Because she had her hair in like two little pigtails that her mother probably braided for her. I mean, otherwise she might have done it herself. I don't think 10-year-old is going to do those braids. But anyway, I assume the mother did it. And I just said, well, thank you. And she was like, thank you. And I was like, thank you. And then I looked up at the mom and smiled. And then I left. And I got a palm leaf thing. I don't know. What is the history of the palms for Palm Sunday? I'm going to say they represent like swatches or something that the Roman soldiers beat Jesus with, or whatever the fuck happened on the the whole Easter weekend or whatever. I don't know what the difference. Palm Sunday, Good Friday. I don't know what Palm Sunday is. Good Friday is when they crucified him, and Easter Sunday is when he rose from the grave and ascended back into heaven or whatever. I'm not sure. But I took a palm with me and I put it on the dashboard of my Kia Sportage. And then they had fashioned little crosses out of pieces of palm with a pin through them. So I took one of those too. And I just left it on my passenger seat. I thought it would bless me for my trip to Grand Rapids. And then I drove to Grand Rapids. And I had asked Chris Tate. I was like, Grand Rapids is straight across southern Michigan. So Detroit is all the way east and Grand Rapids is almost all the way west in southern Michigan. And it looked very easy to take the interstate there, but I asked my boy Chris Tate, hey, is there a more scenic way to get there? And he was like, actually, yeah. He's like, you take Grand River Avenue, it goes all the way from Detroit to Grand Rapids, one road. And he's like, it was the old train road, so it'll take you through all these old train towns, and they're going to be in a variety of different shapes. And I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do that. And I was like, I wonder how long it's going to take. Spoiler alert, it took 5 hours to take that road because there were stoplights on it and stuff. It wasn't a highway. Once I got out past Lansing, which is in south central Michigan, which is where the University of Michigan is, or Michigan State. Yeah, Michigan State is in Lansing. That's the green and white ones, right? And then University of Michigan is the blue and maize. That's in Ann Arbor. Anyway, maybe it was the other way around. I don't know. Anyway, just past Lansing, it turned into farmland and there were no real stoplights anymore, but it was still, the speed limit was still like 45. So it took 5 hours to get out there, but I had nothing else to do. And then I ended up, I was hoping I would get to stay in a nice place in Grand Rapids. Like I hoped I'd be able to stay right by the arena. But the cheapest hotel they had anywhere in downtown Grand Rapids was $144. And I couldn't find the shitty motels. Which I figured must be around somewhere. There was a place where I thought they might have been called Alpine, which was like 13 miles northwest of where I was, which was going to be further away from Detroit and having to drive back for the next day. So I ended up just getting a $61 hotel out by the airport, and my hotel app, Wyndham Garden Inn. It was fucking disgusting. It was dirty. It was grungy. I thought Wyndham Garden Inn was going to be nice, but it was not. The tip off should have been that they were offering it for $61, but I thought that was just because it was a Sunday night. Anyway, I went out there, and I did not love it. But I went out there, dropped my bags. I don't think I napped. I don't think I had time to nap by the time I got out there. Dropped my bags, basically just turned around and went to the venue. And then I got to the venue, and I was like, as soon as I got to the venue, it's in a minor league hockey arena in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Which turns out Grand Rapids is the most populous city in the state of Michigan. Detroit is not. The Detroit metro area has way more people, but the biggest, most populous actual city within the city limits is Grand Rapids. I guess they got some kind of university out there. It looked plenty nice, I guess, Grand Rapids, but I didn't really see much of it. I went into this minor league hockey arena, and I bought my ticket on the floor, and I did the same thing. I got first row of the back section of the floor, right on the corner where the hockey boards would curve. And as soon as I got to my seat there, I was like, I did not get the right seat. Like, this is just, it's too low, too far away, all the way the whole length of an arena back. I was like, I do not like this seat. So I went up, and thankfully the show wasn't, I mean, the place must have held 10,000 people. There were probably like 6,000 or 7,000 people there, which means there were still plenty of empty seats. So I just went up into the 200 level and about halfway back in the arena, and I just found an empty seat, and I sat down in one and watched the end of Olivia Jean set from up there, and then there was a half-hour changeover. More and more people came and sat in the section where I was. No one kicked me out of my seat. But then the show started, and everyone up in the 200 section was sitting down. The people on the floor and down in the 100 sections, they were all standing up, but the people up top were sitting down. And I was like, okay, this will be nice, I guess. I'll just sit down, and I'll watch the whole show from sitting down. But then after like 4 or 5 songs in, I was like, my legs were like, they wouldn't sit still. They were trying to get up. And there was a guy a few rows in front of me who was standing up and like rocking out and had kind of the same haircut as me. And I almost looked at him as like alternate universe me. But a couple of times people like tapped him on the shoulder as if to say like, sit down. And he just turned around and was like, like, I'm gonna fucking stand up and rock out. And I was like, cool, good for that guy. But I don't want to do that because like, I don't want to bother these people who were sitting behind me and nobody's standing up. So I just went all the way to the back of my section, up to almost the back row, or to at least where there was not going to be anyone behind me. And I just fucking danced. And I danced so hard and I fucking loved it. And then I didn't have to worry about blocking anybody's view or feeling bad about it. And then for the encore, I went back to the dead back of the arena in the center, and I watched like the first song in the encore from back there, but I was like, I don't like these seats as much and it doesn't sound as good from here. It's just a little bit weird. So I went back to where I had been before and just fucking danced my ass off for the rest of the show. And it was certainly like a bit of a reminder, you know, like never judge a book by its cover when it comes to a venue. Like, because I walked in there and it was Sunday night, it was a big hockey arena, had no vibe, it wasn't the vibe like the Masonic Temple. And it definitely like how it had a Sunday vibe in general. And it turned out that like, you know, like it didn't feel good energy. And then of course when people weren't standing up dancing. But what happened was about halfway through the show, everybody in the 200 section started dancing too and like got up out of their seats. I don't think it didn't even happen like during one song. It just slowly more and more people were standing up, and it was like his energy, Jack's energy transformed everyone in the arena to be dancing. And then they did Steady As She Goes. They didn't do it as part of the encore, but they did like that really bluesy slow burn version that I mentioned earlier. And he was just doing these like really cool blues licks and nothing fancy, not like guitar pyrotechnics at all. And I think that's maybe not when people stood up, but that's when the energy really turned. And people were just like hollering from every corner of the arena during these slow blues runs and stuff. And like, not everybody at the same time, but like he'd hit one lick and the girls in that corner of the arena would be like, yeah! And it was just like, wow, okay, this place is coming alive. And then the whole rest of the show was just kind of on another level. It was so fucking good. Then woke up the next day and I drove all the way back to Detroit. This time I took the interstate back because I wanted to get back there and things I wanted to do. I wanted to go visit the Third Man Record store again. I wanted to visit Hotel Yorba. I wanted to see if I was going to stay at the Hotel Viking or maybe I was going to stay at the Hotel Yorba, which the White Stripes named a song after and filmed a video in. And I also wanted to go to Buddy's Detroit Pizza. So because of all that, I took the interstate. I took the faster way. And because it wasn't a day of exploring more of Michigan, that's what I had done the day before by taking the 5-hour route. But I was like, I need to get back there as quickly as possible. Actually pulled over for a little while at a rest stop to do therapy on the phone. And then I got back and I went right to Third Man Records and I got another coffee at Avalon and I went in a Third Man. And then I was like, all right, the Viking Hotel it's going to be $62 tonight, which I was like, found that to be very fair. But I was like, first, before I do that, let me go to the Hotel Yorba. So I went and found the Hotel Yorba, which was like 3 miles west of downtown Detroit, right along the river. And I got out there and it was literally nestled between train tracks and a bunch of like industrial buildings and a bunch of like literally massive parking lots for tractor trailers. And it would just look like a scummy rundown part of town. Wasn't even a residential part of town, but it had this big hotel called Hotel Yorba with a big sign on the roof that I recognized from seeing from the video for Hotel Yorba. And there was a cop car there and like 4 or 5 people outside when I pulled up, and I just kind of like pulled up in the parking lot, and it was really nice out. It was like almost 70 degrees. So I just put the windows down in my car and opened the driver's side door, and I was texting some friends and took a picture, and I was like, man, the plan was, hey, let me go see how much it costs to stay at the Hotel Yorba, if it's even really still a hotel. Because I had read something online from like 2013 from the Detroit Free Press saying it was still like a flophouse hotel and basically where they dropped off parolees who had just been let out of prison. And that's kind of the vibe I got. This place looked really run down. There's plastic sheeting over all of the windows. The cops were there. It was like the people outside looked one step above homeless, and I was like, man, I don't even know if I want to go inside. It certainly I don't think I can stay here tonight, just for health reasons. It felt like a health hazard, both for COVID and other reasons. It just felt like really shady. But I was like, you know what? I made it all the way out here. I'm not gonna at least go in and give it a shot. But So I walked in and I was just wearing dirty jeans and a, a dirty hoodie that I'd been wearing for the whole time I had been out in Detroit. So I don't think I looked particularly nice. And I had a Carhartt hat and I tucked my hair up under the hat. I didn't want to look super hipster when I went in there. Um, but I was like, because I was like, I want to get some information about this place. And so I walked in and I opened the door to the lobby, and there was a black squirrel in the vestibule. There were two doors, one that opened from the outside, then you stepped into this little vestibule, and then another door. So there was a black squirrel in there, and it was like running around in circles and looked very scared and was like letting out this high pitched. So I held the door open for the squirrel for a little while, trying to let him in and let him out. He didn't want to come out, so then I opened the next door and I was in, found myself in the lobby of the hotel, and I looked to the left, and then it was all decrepit in there. There was a Pepsi machine that looked like it was left over from the 70s. I kid you not. And then there was a door going, there was a couple of stairs leading up, and then there was a door with a handwritten sign that said, TV room is closed because of COVID until further notice. I was like, man, they got a TV room. Okay, that doesn't seem like a good thing for a hotel either yet. And then I walked up to the office slash, check-in reception desk, and there was bulletproof glass covering it. And there was a white woman sitting behind the counter, and I walked up and I was like, hey, so do you do rentals by the week and by the month? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, well, how much is that? And she was like, it's $100 a week and $400 a month. And I was like, how about by the night? And she's like, the night is $35. And I was like, okay, shared bathrooms, I assume? And she was like, yeah, shared bathrooms, in each hallway. And I was like, okay. And I knew I didn't really want to stay there for the night. So I was like, all right, and how does it work if I want to stay for a week or a month? And she said, well, if you want to stay a week or a month, you need a $200 security deposit, and I need proof of income. And I was like, proof of income? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, well, can I just pay in advance? She's like, well, yeah, you have to pay in advance, but I also need to see proof of income. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not working right now. She's like, well, then I can't rent to you. And I was like, but even if I pay in advance? And she's like, if you're not working, how are you going to pay? And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, all right, then guess I'll figure something else out until I find a job. And she was like, well, okay, well, once you have proof of income, you can come back and I'd be happy to rent to you. And I was like, well, all right. So I just left and I walked outside, and there was a dude sitting on the bike rack outside, probably in his 60s, black dude wearing a full red sweatsuit, like sweatpants, sweatshirt, red sneakers on, and a red ball cap. And I walked over to him. I was like, hey, buddy, let me ask you a question. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, is this a good place to stay? Is it decent? And he went, it's fair. And I was like, is it clean? And he's like, oh, yeah, they got a nice lady who comes and cleans the rooms once a week. And I was like, the bathroom's clean? Like good hot water? And he was like, yeah, clean enough. I was like, okay, thank you. He was like, well, all right. I said, I don't have a proof of income right now, so she won't rent to me. And he was like, well, oh, well. I was like, okay. And I went and got my rental car. And I left. And now I feel like I've got to stay at the Hotel Yorba. But that night, so I was like, I'm not going to stay there that night. And I was going to stay at the Viking, which is walking distance to the Little Caesars Arena where I was going on Monday Night Raw. But Adam and his friend Johnny, Adam had sorted out tickets for them to Monday Night Raw too. So I texted Adam and I was like, hey man, can I just drive that back out to Ann Arbor and stay at your place tonight? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, cool. Then rather than you come meet me in town, because it was 4:00 at that point. So it was like, why do I have to, we were supposed to meet at 6:30 at the Little Caesars Arena. So I was like, why am I going to just fucking kill time for 2 hours? I just drive back out to Adam's house, spend another night with him, and actually get more hang time by driving into the Detroit and back out of Detroit with him. And I could see him in the morning. So I did that, and that turned out to be the perfect way to do the night, because we got tons more hang time together, and then I didn't have to pay for a motel at all and worry about whether the Viking Inn was really sketchy. So I stayed in Adam's beautiful house again, and then I woke up yesterday morning and drove back to the airport, and then I got back to New York, and as I'm in the airport in Detroit, I found out about this crazy shooting that happened on the subway in New York, and it didn't seem like that big of a deal to me. Obviously, it was a big deal, but it was also just kind of like, well, yeah, shooting on the subway, right? Like, well, that shit happens, Like, that's just kind of New York. And then I was on JetBlue. I got on the plane, and I was like, fuck it. I'm going to turn on the TV and see what's going on. And then, of course, every fucking channel you turn on JetBlue, and it's like they had the local channels, and then they had the MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. They were all reporting on this. And very quickly, I was like, oh, fuck. Because it was all like, it's a lot like 9/11. And the fear-mongering media networks were making out to be worse than it was. I mean, that's hard to say. Like, yeah, it was pretty bad. I guess 10 people got shot. 16 people got injured. Nobody got killed, which I think is weird. Apparently, the guy had a smoke grenade or something, so he let off a smoke bomb, and the car started filling with smoke, and he started shooting people, which is completely fucked up. Yes, of course. But I had texted a friend, my buddy Diamond David Blend, and I had said, hey man, like you wanna hang out? Someone gave me Yankee tickets for tonight, so I said, hey, you wanna go to the Yankee game with me tomorrow? And he was like, what are you, crazy? I'm not going anywhere. And I was like, why? And he's like, goddamn terrorist attack in the subway. And I was like, what? I was just some guy shot people. He's like, bro, I'm not getting on the fucking subway for months or maybe a year. I don't know. He's like, I'm married now. And I was like, yeah, but why can't you get on the subway? He was like, what are you, crazy? You get killed. And I was like, oh. And then it started to dawn on me that, like, people in New York were freaked the fuck out about this. So I took the flight home, and then, of course, I put on the news, and I'm like, oh, fuck, this is pretty fucked up, right? And then I get back to JFK, and I'm like, well, okay, well, how am I going to get home? I'm going to take the air train to the A train and just take the subway home. And that's what I did. And there was really no weird vibe on the subway. And then I got home yesterday, and I just hung out at home all day. I actually went to sleep pretty early and slept in pretty late. And then another friend texted me this morning. It's like, what's the vibe like in New York on the streets? Is it crazy because of the subway thing? And I was like, I rode the subway yesterday. I didn't even really think about it. And then that friend was like, what? You rode the subway yesterday? And I'm like, yeah. Like, what are you going to stop riding on the subway because there was a shooting that happened? Like, people were getting pushed into the subway tracks like crazy a couple of years ago. There was a whole, like, it was happening at a fucking alarming rate. But it didn't mean I wasn't going to get in the subway again. I think that's just kind of living in New York. You understand and learn that, like, crazy shit's going to happen all the time, right? And, like, so a bunch of cars have plowed into these, sidewalk seating areas and cafes recently, and it's just like, man, you just live in a big enough city and weird shit's gonna happen, but you can't let that bother you too much. But I did see that the mayor put out a statement yesterday. This mayor Eric Adams, who's been rounding up fucking homeless encampments and trashing their tents and everything, he just announced they're gonna double the police presence on the subways. And it's kind of like, man, you already had 3,500 fucking cops patrolling the subway stations and subway trains at any given time. You're going to double that to 7,000? Like, if 3,500 fucking police in the subway system didn't deter this guy, they didn't even catch the guy. So whatever cops were at the subway station where this happened, like, that guy got off the train and fucking walked out, and they still haven't caught him. As when I'm recording this, it's like, it's like every time, and Eric Adams, the mayor of New York now, is a former fucking cop. And, like, the cops just, every time there's any sort of crime, they make it seem like the end of the world and like that only they can save us and they're going to need more funding. And it's like, the fucking NYPD gets over $10 billion in funding. That's more than the Ukraine's entire military. Like, more cops is not going to do it. Like, but I'm not going to get into more of this. But I certainly don't want to live in a police state. And that's what New York is starting to feel like. And even when I got here couple of weeks ago, I texted a bud and I was like, there's fucking cops everywhere in the subway. And like, I got out to change trains at whatever, it was J Street Borough Hall, and there were cops everywhere. And I was just like, what the fuck is going on? He's like, yeah, man, it's like subways especially are turning into a police state. And it's like, just one more reason I just don't know that I want to be here. Really, I want to get back to wide open spaces. So in a couple of weeks, I'm going to go get my motorcycle in Idaho. I'm going to drive down to Zion and figure out what's next, but I don't think living in the city is part of it. Though we'll see, I might spend a bunch of time here over the course of the summer for my boat cruises and stuff, but like, I don't know, man, this just isn't for me. I think I'm a country bumpkin now. So that's it for today. Extra long podcast, I guess, to make up for last week. Take it easy, kids. Ride the subway. Don't live your life in fear. The world's going to end soon enough anyway. So what's the difference? Like, If you get shot by a fucking subway guy today or get burned up in a wildfire, next fall, or, we could all die in a nuclear war. So make the best of every day. Check in on the people who love you. Let them know you love them. Hopefully they love you back. Maybe they'll tell you. But yeah, just keep being good to one another, I guess. That's my only advice is to seize the day. Carpe diem. Live for the moment. You know what I mean? God bless you, and inshallah.